My dear colleagues, students, and all about the Department of Social Sciences, Arts and Cultural Studies at this university. I welcome you all to the webinar on NKDA market of New Town, Rajarhat, the dynamics of conceived and lived space. Our guest speaker for this webinar is Talia Chakraborty. He is at present professor in Department of Sociology, Jadavpur University. She has a teaching experience of more than 26 years in various prestigious universities and colleges like Bardhaman University, Presidency College. She has successfully completed 5 national research projects and she has published various books, chapters, and articles in national and international journals. She is the recipient of prestigious M.N. Srinivas Memorial Prize for Best Paper for the year 2011 by Indian Sociological Society. Ma'am, on behalf of the Department of Sociology, I am expressing our heartfelt thanks for accepting our invitation and manage your time from your busy schedule for today's webinar. Ma'am, thank you for accepting our invitation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for the invitation. And straight away, I just like to start this presentation. As you all know, probably that the presentation title is NKDA Market of New Town, Rajarhat, the dynamics of conceived and lived space. Now, this is actually part of a RUSA project of Jadavpur University. And in this project, Niparanna Guho was my project assistant. So I requested her to be here so that she can show you some of the relevant visuals. So here we go. Now this NKDA market is actually a local market of New Town, Rajarhat. And you all know that it is a planned city developed in private-public partnership and located on the northeastern fringes of Kolkata, West Bengal. The city has been produced in neoliberal times with its insistence on frictionless, well-organized, and well-surveilled smart city, primarily for the upwardly mobile middle class and the rich. Now, the local markets, integral part of the master plan of the city, are spaces for programmed everyday exchange and consumption for the local residents. This market space is devoid of any glitter and splendor, which are otherwise typical of New Town city space. It is established and run by NKDA, that is the New Town Development Authority, and located at Action Area 1. Now, this is outcome of people's, both the buyers and sellers, everyday needs, as well as the administrative designs to cater to local needs while retaining the clutter-free planned layout of the smart city. Interestingly, this also indicates on one hand the limitation on the part of the big retail business like Spencer, Reliance, which were present almost since the inception of the city to fulfill the demands of the city dwellers. And on the other hand, the necessity to accommodate the supply by the small businessmen and farmers of the adjoining areas to fill that gap. Now, all the everyday requirements of the residents, like the vegetable, fish, poultry, stationery and grocery shops, shops for electrical and electronic items, bed and linens, sweets and confectionery, gift, cosmetics, medicine shops, barber shops, kitchen appliances, utensil shops, hardware shops, loose flour, potted plants, whatnot. All these are available under one roof in the permanent structure of the market. Now, construction of new markets in different blocks at regular interval and the daily footfall in it proves its worth for the people. But the first such market is this market, that is the NKD marketplace, the case in point for this presentation. And it was constructed and used only for the purpose of shopping, unlike the ambience of the retail stores located in posh malls, which encourages entry of the public without obligation to buy. Other community markets developed later by NKDA were designed for multiple usages other than merely shopping. Like, there is organic farming in the rooftop in one of the community markets. Then there is community halls located in CB Block community market. But these are conspicuous by their absence in this NKDA market. Now, the focus of this paper is on the space of the market, its diverse and fluid meanings for the players whose interests and performances in relation to the market space unravel a striking collage of usages and practices. Now, Lefebvre's idea of social production of space and Harvey's exploration of political economy of urban space offer insights to analyze the extent and nature of actions and interventions into the spaces and also the human life over there. This theoretical orientation is part of a general postmodernist critique of modern social science because of its prioritizing of time and history over space and geography. Now, beyond the meta-narratives like globalization, neoliberal economy, and the crisis, this presentation draws on an ethnographic research on the vendors of this market, which produces a thick description of their work and other activities in the micro context of the market, created and managed by the city administration. I consider market space not merely as context in which actors act, but they are products of ongoing practices of definitions and redefinitions constructed by actors inside and outside the market. I use Lefebvre's concept of space codification, which refers to the codes that regulate space and define the uses of the place, like who can use it and for what purpose, etc. Some of these codes here are formally and informally established by authorities and power relations, but many emerge from daily negotiations among users of the space or are framed by customary practices. Lefebvre offers us a conceptual triad. The one is spatial practice, the second is representations of space, and the third is spaces of representation. That is, space is viewed in three specific moments that blur into each other. The first one is the perceived, second is the conceived space, and the third is the lived space, that is the physical, mental, and social space. The first, that is the perceived, takes place as a physical form when space has been considered as in its physicality, the real space, the space that is generated and used. The second, that is the conceived, is a mental construct of the imagined space, such as map, as the instrumental space of professionals, technocrats, architects, social engineers, geographers, urban planners, developers. And ideology, power, and knowledge underlie such representation. This is the space of capital, state, and bourgeoisie. The third, that is the lived space, considers space of everyday experience as produced and used over time. And the use invests space with informal and local symbolism and meaning or meanings, space as simultaneously real and imagined. That means all social actors entertain ideas about the concrete spaces which constitute their life. That means ideas are also there, and the concrete space that they're using, that is also part of that. So a space of representation, that is the lived space, is alive, qualitative, fluid, and dynamic. As a typical social space, this market is not a place given to us by nature, but instead is imagined and constructed by individuals working together. This space, itself a product of social activity, makes social action possible. Following Lefebvre, I understand the city space in general and the market space in particular as an ongoing process, a production. It is the human agency which transforms the conceived space of the global and the local players representing state and the market into a lived space of everyday practices and meanings. Now, the method that I have followed, one is obviously observation. Another is qualitative in-depth interviews with vendors, customers, NKD officials. All these have been used for collection of primary data. Oral history has been recorded to understand how the informants experienced life in the city before this market, witnessed relevant events related to setting up of this market, and many developments taking place in the market and its impact. The plan documents of the government, relevant government orders, public notices, scholarly and newspaper articles, and NKDA websites have been examined. Attempt has been made to construct a visual narrative locating structures and processes. Now, the first dimension I like to take up is the history of the space. Now, the speciality of this market has been understood in relation to considerations of temporality and history. Hence, the focus is on how the market space has been actively produced. I focus on this word actively. The city space was produced by acquiring village and agricultural lands, ponds and wetlands from 34 mojas across North and South 24 Parganas. The process was initiated way back in 1993 to create state's first, I quote, green, eco-friendly, self-sufficient and smart city. I'm following the West Bengal HITCO 1999 document. Now, large-scale displacement, loss of land and livelihood on the part of farmers and fishermen, erasure of histories and identities are intrinsic part of the spatial mapping and remapping of the city space, which is characterized by a curious mix of coercive as well as consent building exercises. The ongoing process of urbanization in the context of neoliberal urban development regime remains spatially incomplete till today and uneven despite the master plans and administrative political designs of formal and informal kinds. Now, an exploration into the origin of the market reveals that though the security, comfort, and the feeling of high-class global living draw people to this new township, life was not easy for the early settlers, particularly those who settled here in the first decade of this century. Procuring items of daily need was difficult. Slowly, vegetable vendors, the actual farmers of adjoining areas of Rajarhat and Bhangor, started pouring into the city with their carts full of fresh vegetables, fish, poultry. They used to come every morning, parked themselves in front of the gated apartments, the most common type of residence on offer in the city, and made phone calls to their regular customers who stays inside. Over the time, the front of many such big apartments and stretches of roads adjacent to the most populated part of the city got encroached by ugly shacks. Though convenient for the residents, no doubt, it caused traffic chaos, garbage accumulation at certain points, posed dangers of fire as shacks were made primarily of bamboo, then plastic, then tin, and compromised the aesthetic of the planned space. The New Town Development Authority, which has been constituted for rendering various civic services and amenities within this city, intervened, and many shack owners got permanent stalls in this NKDA marketplace, which is located in street number 45, AD Block, Action Area 1. This is the market first developed by NKDA. Thus, in the conceived space, that is, I just told you, the mental construct of the planners, developers, the logic of clean and organized smart city was spatially achieved through scripting, street vending as problematic, and enclosed market, permanent market, as a possible solution to this problem. After the master plan of the construction of New Town was formulated by HITCO, land was given on lease to NKDA for the construction of the market. To enlist the eligible vendors and to make them aware to participate in the lottery through which the position of the shops at the market would be finalized, The NKD officials made several rounds of photo documentation and visits to the area close to the central bus terminus where this NKD market plot was located. After allocating shops to the vendors from the nearby streets, the rest was then sold to people by putting advertisements in NKDA website and the daily newspapers. Later, several meetings were held with vendors who didn't want to occupy the shop space, even after the allotment, though they have got it through lottery, but they're not shifting. Every shop owner interviewed, who were street vendors operating in and around this place, categorically mentioned being approached by NKDA men who informed them about the market and later collected all documents from them and somehow managed the whole situation for them. Many of them pointed out that some vendors who were not there on the day of taking photograph by the NKDA men missed the opportunity, though they were also otherwise eligible to get a stall in the market. Some of the shop owners mentioned political affiliation played a role to get a stall space, but nobody admits it to happen in his or her case. The owner of each shop has a lease agreement and pays a rent of a meager amount to NKDA through a bank. Some of the vendors who operate from rented shops at the market pay about rupees 4,000 to 7,000 per month to the owner. This indicates the high demand for the shop space in the market. Later, many more community markets were built in different blocks and a fewer in the pipeline. And the nature of these community markets and the first market that has been built by the NKDA, that is the case in point here, there are certain differences in the nature of these markets. My focus here is obviously on the oldest one. Now, the location of this market and what is the significance of that location. Now, this market is located in the most populated area of the city, surrounded by big apartment blocks. The main bus terminus is a few minutes walk. Wide roads ensure easy vehicular access as well as enough space for parking. Now, heavy and long presence of street vendors in the same zone guarantee presence of customers. So all these formed an ecosystem in the area which is favorable for commercial activity. Now, as the focus is on the space, so naturally I'll focus on the structure of the market. The NKDA marketplace, this is the biggest with approximately 180 shops, and the oldest and also the most popular one is a plain looking gated, there are in total 8 gates, space, and it's a rectangular kind of shape it has with curved asbestos roof on it. The visible boundaries of the walls and manned gates give rise to an appearance of a separation between the spaces within and outside the market, though in fact what exists is an ambiguous continuity, that is, things and people cross the boundaries all the time. This market is divided into 7 lanes. Each lane contains mainly shops selling specific items. This division into specialized lanes might be a form of disciplining the sellers or might be a customer-friendly way of clustering stalls for similar items. There is a poorly maintained toilet for only the vendors to use. Market has a temple too, though this market receives maximum footfall on a daily basis, but both the buyers and the sellers complained about its poor infrastructure and design, which makes it hot and humid, specifically in summer months. Now, very shortly, vendors' profile. Now, the vendors are mostly male individuals. A few young married couples, mother-son combination, and some middle-aged female vendors are located. Hindu general caste that constitute the majority, though many Muslim vendors and a few Dalit vendors are also located. Majority of them are from the villages located in the outskirts of the city, New Town, like Mohishbatan, Gaurangonagar, Ramkrishnapalli, Parulia, Patropara, etc. Regarding the age range, I find that the age range is quite wide, from 24 years to 73 years of age. Level of education on an average very low. A good number of them hailed from the family of street vendors or mobile vendors dealing with the same items that they sell now, and many are from the family of farmers. Female vendors were either homemakers or worked as domestic helps before. They continue to fulfill their domestic obligation, and some still continue working as maids in Newtown apartments. It is expected that many vendors would draw on their vending experience before, with adjustment to the local imperatives. But those with different earlier livelihood experience, like the farmers, would need to initiate a new set of practices, which is much more difficult and obviously challenging. Now, I find a vendor with BTech degree, and he expresses its adjustment problem as his family background and the educational background is totally different from majority of the fellow vendors. His father actually worked in army, and they stay in a big gated apartment very close to the market. Vendors have given a rough estimate of their monthly income ranging from rupees 2,000 to rupees 60,000 per month. The lowest amount claimed to be earned by the tea and snacks vendor, while the highest amount is reportedly earned by the sweet shop owner. Factors which may explain this variation of earnings are levels of investment, like investment for greater amount of items or better quality of items, or sometimes more invested needed for renting of stalls in addition to the allotted shop. The variation of earning is also because of variation in the demand for the items, or some sell multiple wares or services, thereby they're earning more. Duration of business transaction is also a factor. That is, those who are just started the business activity for a year, and those who are there in the stall for from the very starting of the beginning of this market. Obviously, there is a difference of their level of earning. Also, we find there is augmenting income from economic activity outside the market, like car renting business, real estate brokerage, or even private tuition. What is interesting is that vendors selling same items report quite different monthly incomes, which could be a source of jealousy, fueling animosity. All vendors here were given shops of equal size, but some later took other shop space on rent to accommodate more products or to conduct more than one business. Some vendors point out the practice of getting ownership of more than one shop in the name of other family members. I just like to share the example of Ranjit Bala, who's the wedding store owner, and he has one allotted stall, another he has taken on rent, and the one on rent, there he make the pillows and the comforters, and the allotted stall that he has used for, normally he used for selling. Same is true for the sweet shop owner, that is the one on rent, that space has been used for making the sweets, and the allotted one in the same market that is used for selling the sweets. Now I'll try to understand the everyday practices in that space. Now the vendors work, and this is something typical of any market. I mean, this is not something specific to the unique about this market. That is consists of primarily of arranging goods, weighing items, communicating prices, dealing with bargains, selling item, and taking care of the unsold. Now, though the official business hour is from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., as per NKDA website, business actually take place roughly between 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then again from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day. Business is more intense in the morning, reaches its peak during weekend, specifically during the Sunday mornings. Shops for grocery, bedding, various kinds of repairing, tailoring, etc. get more customers during evening. Sellers of cooked food or drink have more hectic schedule as they remain continuously engaged with different stages of preparing their items. For female sellers, the daily work routine is oppressive, as in addition to business activities at market, they have to manage household chores. Now, their work flows outside the market space because they need to visit the supplier to maintain the stock, and those who provide different services routinely visit their clients. For those dealing with fresh raw food like vegetable, fish, etc., the everyday work routine is tough, as they need to bring the goods, then arrange those on a daily basis. Since the market has full-time security guards, items with long shelf life can be stored and arranged for long period of time inside the shop. However, some sellers arrange even durable items on a regular basis as they keep some of their products outside their shops. This serves the dual purpose of one, the temporary expansion of the size of the shop accommodating more items, and secondly, the better visibility of the items displayed to attract more customers. Such art of enticement often generates tension as it causes inconvenience to the neighboring shop as well as for the customers by narrowing down the lanes inside the market, more so during the peak business hours. Now, those selling items like vegetable, fruits, fish, electrical appliances like fan, refrigerator, bedding items like comforter, seasonal variation is more marked in their work. Those who deal with perishable items like fruit, vegetable, fish, meat, sweets, loose flour, festive items like firecrackers, they frequently incur losses as excess unsold items cannot be kept for long. Hence, the calculation of demand and supply was more crucial for them. For fish, fruits, and vegetables, flying customers who closely inspect the items and evaluate the price from among all the shops in the market before buying outnumber the fixed customers. Grocery, electrical repairing, etc., on the other hand, invite more fixed customers. The tea stall owner has captive buyer, that is the other vendors of the market who regularly buy tea from him 50-60 cups daily. Bargaining is a routine affair. The sellers admit that they never compromise their minimum profit level. Online wallets are extensively used in market transaction. Now, with this descriptive note regarding the everyday activities, now it is possible for me to point to how in course of this everyday activities, the vendors, they recodify the space. That means the codes which are given in the conceived space, how that has been worked on. So this is a very interesting kind of analysis where we find that the pre-existence of the market space that conditions the seller's presence, action, and discourse in the market. The location of the market in the city, the size and location of the stall within the market, the physical structure of the market, all these have definite impact on everyday practices of the vendors who make use of it. Yet, their presence, action, and discourse also change or even negate the space. This endorses the fact that, I quote, there is politics of space because space is political. Almost all the sellers modify the planned space allotted to them to suit their various needs, business or personal. A few illustrative examples of intervention on the administrative design, thereby recodifying the space, may be cited. Items and furnitures are routinely kept outside the shops, occupying common areas to store and display the wares. Thus, the formally allotted space for the stall owners gets reworked, and they construct definitions of my place vis-a-vis or in opposition to their space or other space. Often, this intervention is temporary in nature. When the shopkeeper puts hanging devices outside the stall for displaying items like chips or festive items like rakhis, or keeps a few crates full of fresh vegetables in front of their stall, or takes back everything inside at the end of the business hour. So this is temporary type. But some vendors permanently encroach the common area for storing items or for business related activities like repairing things. Moreover, sellers transform their vending space into resting space, particularly during non-operating business hours at noon, thus extending its use beyond business purposes. One of the female sellers, it is found, has kept a low and small bed under the raised platform where her vegetables are displayed. She rests there in the afternoon after closing her shop. Though the market was designed as a public space, the inherent porosity of the boundary between the public and the private becomes evident. Another seller has built a false ceiling inside his shop to get a ceiling fan to escape the heat generated by the asbestos ceiling of the market. They also use their shops as well as the common areas of the market for activities like eating, conversing, listening to music, playing games, watching videos, often with fellow vendors on mobile phones. Very interesting is another finding, that is, one 73-year-old tea stall owner has made the shop his home, where he stays with his wife. He lives and conducts business there. Same is true for Amit Das, the 28-year-old fish vendor from Sonarpur, who stays in his rented shop due to the difficulty of commuting from a distant place. At the backside of the same market next to the toilet, the common area has been fully occupied by a wide variety of potted plants. The couple selling indoor and outdoor plants is responsible for this. Now, all these indicate how the representations and practices of space contribute to the production of spaces, transforming a public vending place into a private space for business and related activities, or even for leisure, sleep, or household space. All these may be viewed as diverse forms of subversion, intended or unintended, of planned space and reproduction of the same. Thus, even a hyper-organized, strictly designed and regulated space, that is a planner space or expert space, may produce novel forms of lived space. Naturally, this generates tension between the sellers and buyers, because the buyers cannot freely walk through the lanes due to encroachment of common areas, and between the vendors and the administration. Why administration? Because administration is responsible for the maintenance of the market. Now I'm continuing with this point, that is recodification, but it is recodification of another type. That is, here what we find is that business space turning into space for forging relationship. Now the market, though conceived for the explicit purpose of formal impersonal business transaction for private profit, that is a capitalist space meant for exchange, work, and consumption, what we find is it also promises interaction and strengthens old meaningful bonds and nurtures real socialities. Despite the round-the-clock presence of security guards and occasional visits by NKD officials, or even the control by the market committee, this market is definitely not a total institution regulating every expression of human agency. Market is, after all, a social space where both economic and extra-economic relationships are developed and maintained. Unlike the concept of social capital, which focuses on the economic significance of social relations, viewing the market as a social space emphasizes the social significance of economic relationships. Now, the sellers in this market, in general, they personally know the fellow sellers from their street vending days. Many are relatives and they're from the same villages. There is usually a special bond between sellers of same lane or the neighboring shops. Religion, caste, and other differences, vendors claim, hardly matter. Small group of vendors having food together, drinking tea, smoking, watching video films together, playing cards at noon, or enjoying loud music while working. Then women vendors chatting in the corner, chatting at the gates, sitting at the gates, in front of the temple. These are common sights. The fact that sometimes they leave their shops in the care of neighbor testifies a relationship of trust. Concrete personal relations and networks of such relations play a key role in generating this trust. These relationships serve vital economic functions, providing the sellers with credit, critical business information, or other forms of mutual support. Hence, these relationships are certainly a form of social capital that positively impacts economic activity. It also has non-economic significance, even though it develops within the market context. Now, though located outside the market, Suppliers of goods for the vendors of the market are also key players of the business taking place in the market. For many, relationship with supplier is simple business transaction where items are bought against immediate payment in full. But vegetable sellers like Manoj Mondal or Shondha Patro, to name a few, do not have to immediately pay. These imply a relationship of trust which develops over time. But the fact that the vendors are located in a market and unlike the mobile vendors, easy to trace, might be an important basis for such trust. So the space is crucial. Now, majority of the sellers belong to a completely different world from the residents of the new world, their customers. So now I'm talking about the relation between the sellers and the customers. Now, the two categories of people are forced by their mundane necessities to confront each other. I consciously use the word confront in the market space as part of their everyday routine. Thus, the market is also a place of encounter. Despite the attempts to homogenize neighborhoods and to forge clearly demarcated public spaces, mixing of types and genres cannot be avoided. The fluid boundary forms a zone of surprising and potentially conflictual contact. The relation with customers is mostly reported as business relation and generally cordial. Shoikat, who runs an electrical repairing shop, narrates personal bond with many of his customers. This may be due to the fact that he, with a good educational background and himself being a resident of the city, he stays in a gated apartment, belong to the world of the customers only. But Jagadish Mondal, who has an electrical repairing shop, Hakim Molla, a vegetable vendor, Ram Krishnadas, a grocery shop owner, all from rural, lower or lower middle class background, also report very good personal relation with many of their fixed customers. Now, often the customers, they make phone calls to place the orders and get the goods delivered at home. Sellers also inform their special customers about the arrival of quality products. They mention incidences when the customers are allowed to take the goods and pay later. One vegetable vendor reports that he receives gifts from one or two customers during festival. So these all may reflect the possibility of human emotion to transcend the boundaries. So raw facts of class relations may even be erased. Thus, the market space does not always strengthen and reproduce inequalities among the diverse categories of actors on caste, class, or gender lines. They often appropriate the space and redefine these relations. Now, with this analysis about how this space can be redefined, recodified as a place for relationship, I'm trying to identify recodification of another variety. That is how this business space turning into a conflict zone. So this is also another type of recodification. Now, as a typical market under capitalism, this market too reveals its contradiction between the appearance of security and trust and the constant threat from fellow shopkeepers, customers, and authority, here NKDA, and indeed the occasional eruption of violence. It is observed that some sellers interfere at the time of ethnographic interviews that we have conducted, and they answer on others' behalf, who do not resist actually and remain silent, but with an expression of discomfort written on their faces. The same happened routinely while interviewing female sellers. Their male kins or the male fellow sellers from the neighboring shop spontaneously came to their rescue. And this is accepted as normal practice, normal within single inverted comma. Hence, all sellers are not equals. There are issues like the location of stall privileging some vendors over the others, which might lead to strain in the relationship. For example, those placed closer to the entry point or those placed in a more illuminated space have been understood as privileged. One reveals the advantage of being placed near gates of the market, ensuring greater access and visibility. Another mentioned the issue of placement of a shop in the so-called wrong alley, leading to lack of visibility and consequent reduction of the profit margin. Like there is a food alley and there is a grocery shop over there. So that kind of things happened. Furthermore, competition between two sellers dealing with the same item may turn into bitter conflict. It is found that overcrowding of a specific type of shop forces one to change his business item from, in this case, we find from fruit to watches. Sellers claim that so far only small quarrels take place between them, which are eventually resolved by sellers themselves. There has been no reported incidents of physical fight so far. The tension underlying has been revealed by Shoikar, whose name I mentioned earlier. He complains that the display board of his shop has been repeatedly broken. Now, as this market is a closely guarded space, there is little possibility of outsiders' hand in it. Another vendor reports his inability to prevent a fellow shopkeeper to encroach the space in front of his shop. And he said that despite repeated complaint to the concerned seller and the market committee, nothing happened. More serious is the allegation of Shondha Behra. She accuses the market committee for making attempt to drive her out of the market, as her husband, he's the co-owner of the shop, hails from Orissa, though she is not, and she used to sell snacks for long on the street in the same area, and hence known to many vendors in the market for quite a long time. A few incidents of tension with customers have been reported. Habibul recounts an incident of tension over the use of foul language. The difference in the background of buyers and sellers may have resulted in their use of language in a different way, verbal as well as bodily, particularly in times of tension when one loses his or her cool. The market committee intervened quickly to resolve it. Recently, there was a massive quarrel between two customers and a fruit seller over the price of an item. The customers reported the matter to the police, though police and the market committee together solved the dispute on that day only. Bourgeois anxiety, a sense of insecurity and vulnerability may explain calling police to settle a verbal altercation with the seller. Now, recodification of another variety that I have found, that is, market has been recodified as a space of discontent and fear. Now, the market committee, a few vendors report on condition of anonymity, often takes money from vendors forcefully to organize religious festivals or other celebrations. Often political pressures were reported. NKDA representatives make regular visits to the market, which signify a level of control and surveillance from above. True, all the sellers appear grateful to NKDA for providing them with their most important asset, that is the business space, and that too in most cases almost free of cost. They also appreciate the security, storage facility, electricity connection, etc. that they enjoy here, unlike their street vending days. But grievances regarding poor maintenance, excessive heat due to the asbestos ceiling are frequently expressed. Many of them have reported that their business was much more profitable during the street vending days. Now, as reported by the sellers, the primary reasons for a relative decline of business inside are the increasing presence of new group of street vendors in the nearby areas and parking of government vehicles close to the market as mobile retail outlet for selling vegetables and fruits at reasonable price. Furthermore, the market becomes extremely hot and uncomfortable during the summer months, which drastically reduces the number of customers who naturally prefer visiting air-conditioned supermarkets then. And there are many over there in that city. One of the sellers even discloses that NKDA men threatened him of taking away his shop if he keeps on complaining. Hence, the market space is also codified as a space of discontent and fear, real or imagined. Now, On the basis of all this, a few points becomes apparent. One is that on the one hand, the conceived space of the city is characterized by the smart city orientation, which is definitely in tune with the worlding practices, the concept given by Ong. That is the practice of generating and harnessing global regimes of value activated by models in circulation, like the spectacular urban models of Singapore or that of New York. All these are revealed in terms of through the ads, like ads given by the developers. You frequently come across such kind of ads like New York in Newtown, this kind of ads. On the other hand, both the administration, as revealed in the master plan of the city itself, and the people residing in the city, as revealed in their the online market reviews in NKDA sites, which we have checked, and the data generated by this research, this is very categorical about focusing only the use value of the local markets, which are absolutely devoid of any consideration for world-class amenities. So this is a level of difference, stark difference, which I have located. Secondly, what I have found is that the gorgeous looking shopping malls, which are always integral part of this city, are quite popular among the same residents and even the non-residents who enjoy the shopping, movie watching, dining experience in those malls occasionally. Unlike those malls, that is the shopping malls, the NKDA market caters to the daily shopping requirement of the local residents only, and never visited and appropriated as a space for leisure by the residents and the outsiders. The fact that the regular customers have access to world-class malls and online shopping sites doesn't undermine the demand for this market, which offers fresh and mundane items and all possible ordinary services essential for a regular everyday life. Then I have found that this market has an inbuilt mechanism to respond, among other things, to the need of the resource weak groups like street vendors, hawkers, etc., undermining sheer principles of market and the neoliberal ethic of intense possessive individualism. And finally, this market was conceived by experts, political, administrative, business, and knowledge leaders. It is located in master plans and maps and implemented and maintained by administration. Now, this is obviously an act of power. I'm quoting, a conceived space is a place for the practices of social and political power. In a sense, it is these spaces that are designed to manipulate those who exist within them. So sellers are monitored, instructed, and helped, but not engaged as equals in a collaborative endeavor. Even democratic authorities then do not allow citizens to gain their full rights to the city and to take an active part in designing and regulating their own living environment. Committee is eyewash. This is despite the fact that in the Smart City proposal for Newtown, submitted to Smart City Mission 2015, citizen engagement is the common criteria for evaluation. But this research endorses the fact that power is never complete. The lived space of market offers testimonies of, one, subversion of controlled, segmented, homogeneous conceived space by the vendors. For example, the turning shop into resting place or even turning shop into residence. And two, challenge by vendors, like the deliberate show of indifference to committee or deliberate show of indifference to NKDA, obstructing the pathway by goods or taking up fights with fellow sellers or customers. Now, this deliberate production of differentiated space by the vendors may be taken as a sign of reclaiming their society, reclaiming right to space as a leaped project. Now, you may say that this is an overly romantic position. I agree, because there is no denial of the fact that people's ability to reinterpret and creatively misuse planned space may not necessarily be positive all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for elaborative discussion on the market system. Now, I would request Tiny to moderate the session. I can see some of the questions are there. Tiny? Tiny, are you there? Ma'am, there is one question from our student only, master student Lal.
Yes.
Ma'am, as Newtown was developed as a new satellite township to channelize the huge growth of population in the Kolkata metropolitan agglomeration area, can you explain how does the previous provisions that have been made for different categories of stalls, utility shops in each market has an impact on population? You have already elaborated the structure and the market scenario. The impact on population, you can just elaborate.
Okay. I think I have addressed it, but just to reiterate the point is, first of all, it's a shopping requirement, and the ordinary, shopping requirement of daily requirements of, fish, poultry, say tailoring, all these things which are usually you can't get. So, for example, altering of something or a fresh food. You can get frozen food over there, but fresh food, fresh vegetables and all these things, these are there in the market. And this is surprising. I'm telling you that though the fact that in the, say, for example, there are many now, Moores are also there, Spencer, Reliance, which sell almost, same variety of items. But still we find that this kind of markets, they are very, very popular, particularly this one, which is the oldest one and which is located in a space which is surrounded by big housing complexes. And people every day, and particularly the weekends, we find that they just go over there, collect things, and despite the fact that there is no other amenities available, I mean, you can't enjoy your life over there as you can do in case of malls. There can be some other purposes served, but just the shopping, buying things and then paying the price and coming back, beyond that no other purpose can be served. But still we find that this is very, very popular. That implies that the shopping malls are not in a position to satisfy all the requirements, and there for ordinary daily life some requirements are there which cannot be solved by the malls. Hence this kind of markets, local markets, are popular. Now, this is, as you asked me, from the side of the residents, this is true. And there is another side of it, that is the vendor side. In my particular presentation, I focused on them only. That is, for the vendors also, this is very important, because they are, many of them were the original residents of this city space. Now they have been placed in the corner, and they usually when this city has been constructed, the apartment blocks are coming up. They started coming into the city to sell their vegetables, to sell their the products that they have already produced. And so they started, mobile vending. And slowly and slowly, this mobile vendors, as they are, disturbing the smart city appearance of the city, the smart appearance of the city, that is clutter free, organized. So that's why maybe the NKDA, that is the authority over there, they intervened, and they this market space is already there, so they have transformed this market in a way that these mobile vendors can be accommodated over there. But just to make the point clear, though this is beyond the scope of this particular presentation, that there are other community markets built later by the NKD authority, and these are basically not for the mobile vendors or the rehabilitation as the goal, but rather the shop spaces were sold to the interested people. And there also we find various utility shops and this kind of fish, poultry, and vegetables, etc., are sold. In addition to that, as I told you, some other requirements of the city, like community halls, these are also built, which is conspicuous by its absence in this NKDA market. Then also organic farming, in the rooftop. And there is Sufala stalls which are selling the products of this rooftop organic farm. Through the Sufala stalls, the same has been sold by the NKDA, the authority only. So this kind of diverse usages of the market, that has been developed later. But this one, that is the oldest one, the one that has constructed first by the NKDA, and interestingly, this is the most popular one. Popular in the sense the footfall is the greatest here. This is very plain looking, as well as the purpose served is also very plain. That is the everyday requirement.
Thank you, ma'am. I have one question that you have mentioned about the caste pattern of the sellers. So you have mentioned about the Dalits and some of the Muslim sellers also. So you have also mentioned about the relationship between buyer and the sellers. So did you find, or any of your objective of the project was that to find out the difference between the buyer and seller relationship on the basis of caste? Have you found any difference or any significant thing to discuss?
No, what I've found is that majority are Hindu general caste. And many vegetable sellers, they are Muslims, and there are Dalit by background also, the vendors. But when they are responding to, say, our interviews and all, and also in our observation, we have found that it's not very pronounced. The difference of caste is not very pronounced while they are engaged in various kind of interaction or doing something together. So if it is there, it's subtle. It's implicit. In their everyday action, this is not getting reflected that way. Gender is more pronounced because the way they have been, when the women are responding to our questions, and the way the males are always coming ahead and answering questions on their behalf. So that difference, the gender performativity and the difference, the inequality, patriarchy is more pronounced. Not that pronounced is the caste difference. Okay. So far that we have found. But one particular point I like to mention, as you were talking about this caste composition, is that this is the city, it's the space rather. The original space is the space where majority of the people are the Dalit and the Muslim. Okay, so that was the original composition of the space, which has been remapped by setting up a city over here.
Ma'am, we have a question asked by one of our master students.
Yes.
Already, Kahini, it is already addressed by ma'am. Lal's question.
Okay, okay. Yes. Okay.
Ma'am,
Madhurima, ma'am.
in relation to that previous question of mine, you have seen the general caste only, not specifically Brahmin, Kshatriya, like this. I want to know whether there is any difference on the basis of Brahmin. Like, as we know that this hierarchy setup say that Brahmins usually don't go for these shop things and this seller things. So, did you find anything specifically?
No, this is very much part of our, because we always collected their names and very few objected to that also. So they didn't, they don't want to be anonymous, most of these cases. What they, sometimes they try not to answer some questions, which particularly regarding the market committee or etc. But regarding their identity, their names and the surnames, there is no question of hiding it. So it becomes evident. It is part of our, finding. And what we find is that it's there is no preponderance of the Brahmins or something like that. It's a very mixed that way.
So we can say in the modern era, there is no such caste hierarchy-based job discrimination. If you see this,
I don't think on the basis of this micro study, I'm in a position to say that. I mean, how far this data is generalizable, that's a big question. But so far as we have found, and the focus is more on the vendors who are involved in a one market, who are engaged in one market, there we do not find the caste as a very important factor determining their relationship with each other or determining their choice of occupation, etc. I have found, the Brahmins, I have found the Kashtas and all of them, and that is indicated. I didn't ask them, uh, regarding that caste, but I found that through their surnames only, because we are exposed to the type of surnames which are, you can categorize very well. So on the basis of that, we can derive some observations, and that is the thing that we find. It is not very pronounced. Maybe if they have to do something which is ritually considered as polluted, this might be more pronounced. But when they're just selling their products and having business transaction with the customers or with the suppliers, then the caste identity hardly matters. This is something we have found.
Madhurima, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
So will I get the vote of thanks? Will I get the vote of thanks?
Students, if there are any questions, you can ask ma'am. No question. I've understood everything. So, I would request Madhurima ma'am to formally give the vote of thanks.
So with this, we come to the end of this such a fruitful webinar. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our respected guest speaker for today, Professor Dialia Chakraborty ma'am, for her insightful and enriching lecture on such a pertinent issue. I would also like to express my gratitude to Honorable Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, our respected Dean Sir of School of Liberal Arts and Cultural Studies, our former Dean and Senior Professor, Professor Tridip Chakraborty, our Senior Professor from our department, Professor Vidhi ma'am, without whose support and guidance this webinar would not have been possible, the Cluster Head of Sociology, Dr. Shamili Kuhun Yogi ma'am, all other departmental colleagues, without whose support guidance this would not have been possible, and all my dear students and all the participants for making this webinar a success. Thank you so much, Dalia ma'am, for your valuable time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I'm giving, okay.
Valuable.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Participants, please fill this feedback form.
Yes, in order to get certificates, you need to fill the feedback form. We will keep the meeting live for another minute or two. And then we will, after we end the meeting, you won't be able to access the feedback form and we will not be able to share it anywhere else. So kindly fill the feedback form. It's not a very large one. It's just a few information you need to fill. Do it now in order to get certificates, and hopefully you will receive the certificates in your email within 5 to 6 days. Surely, ma'am, let's mute ourselves and keep the meeting live for another minute so that nobody misses the feedback form. I will share it again. I have shared the link again for everyone. Okay. Hope everyone has got access to the feedback form. I'm ending the meeting now. Is there anyone who has not filled up the feedback form? Okay, thank you everyone. I'm ending the meeting now.